This is Unit 5, Lesson 5. Last lesson of the unit that we're going to be going over, which is graphing quadratic equations in vertex form. So we started with graphing in this unit and we're ending with graphing in this unit. So graphing quadratic equations in vertex form. So I'm actually going to give you the standard form of a quadratic equation in vertex form. And it's y is equal to a times the quantity x minus h squared plus k. So that's the standard, that's the vertex form of a quadratic equation. And then I'm going to do this. I'm going to show you that the opposite of whatever's in parentheses, where that h is, whatever the opposite is, that's the x part of your vertex. And then this k on the outside of the parentheses is the y part of the vertex. And then I'm going to tell you if the a, which is that number that's in front of the parentheses that's being multiplied to the parentheses, if a is positive, if a is positive, the graph opens up. If the a is negative, the graph opens down. So this opens up, this opens down. So that number out in front is going to tell you. We're not really looking at the number, we're looking at the sign, really. If it's a positive, the graph's going to go up. If it's a negative, it's going to open down. That means that vertex is going to be up at the top of that graph. It's going to be our maximum point. Okay, so here's what we're going to be doing for this piece. We're going to be graphing. State the vertex. And axis of symmetry. So the axis of symmetry is that point where it's a critical point. It's where that graph becomes symmetric. It's like a mirror image. So that's what we're kind of looking for. And it's actually the x coordinate of your vertex. So the axis of symmetry is the x coordinate of the vertex. So once you find out what the vertex is, you know what the axis of symmetry is. I usually call this the AOS, axis of symmetry. Okay, so those are the directions. Let's take a look at number 1. We've got y is equal to x minus 2 squared plus 3. So x minus 2 squared plus 3. All right, let's go through and identify the vertex. This one's a little bit easier than what we graphed at the beginning of the unit because we don't have to use that little formula x is equal to negative b over 2a. We don't need to substitute anything in. We just take a look at what's in the parentheses. This is a minus 2. So I take the opposite, which is a positive 2. And then I take whatever number's on the outside, that's the y coordinate. So my vertex is 2, 3. Now I just told you the axis of symmetry is the x coordinate of the vertex. Well, the x coordinate of the vertex is 2, so I know my AOS, axis of symmetry, is 2. Now we're going to graph it. I'm going to take that equation, Put it in the center of my table. And the table piece is the same as what we did at the beginning of this unit. I need to take a look at this number. I'm doing two numbers that come before 2, which are 0 and 1, two numbers after 2, 3 and 4. So that piece doesn't change. 0, 1, 3, 4. All right, let's take these numbers and substitute in. 0 minus 2 is -2. -2 squared is 4. 4 plus 3, that's giving us 7. 1 minus 2 is -1. -1 squared is 1. 1 plus 3, that's giving us 4. 3 minus 1, 3 minus 2 rather, is 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 plus 3, that's giving us 4. And then 4 minus 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 plus 3, that's giving us 7. Now I'm making sure that my y values are repeating. If they're not repeating, I've done something wrong, which they are. They are repeating, so I can continue. I've got 0, 7, 1, 4, 3, 4, and 4, 7. Let's graph it. Okay, so we've got I've got 0, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 1, 4. I've got 3, 4. And I've got 4, 7. And then my vertex is 2, 3. And there's my graph. So I've got my vertex, I've got my axis of symmetry, and I have my graph. Now the directions didn't say to solve, it just said to graph. But if we were to solve this one, where this graph hits the x-axis, well, it never does and it never will. If that vertex is above the x-axis, it's never ever going to hit that x-axis. So this one would be a no solution. If they were asking for a solution, but here we're just graphing. But if they were asking for a solution, this one would be a no solution because this graph will keep going up. It'll never hit this, the x-axis. Okay, let's take a look at number 2. So number 2, we have y is equal to -2 times x plus 1 squared minus 4. Okay, so let's identify the vertex. I'm taking the opposite of what's here. That's a +1, so it's going to be -1. And then whatever number's on the outside, that's what I'm taking. It's a -4, so that becomes a -4. My axis is symmetry. There's the x part of the vertex, which is -1. Okay, let's set up our table. Now I'm going to go two numbers before -1, which is -3, -2, two numbers after -1, 0, 1. So those are the numbers that are going to go in my table. -3, -2, 0, and 1. Okay, let's go through, let's take these numbers and substitute in. -3 plus 1. That's giving us -2. -2 squared is 4. 4 times -2 is -8. Minus 4, that's giving us -12. Let's substitute in -2. -2 plus 1, I'm going to do all the work here, is -1. -1 squared is 1. 1 times -2 is -2. Minus 4, that's giving us -6. Let's substitute in 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 times -2 is -2. Minus 4 is -6. 1 plus 1 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times -2 is -8. Minus 4 is -12. I'm making sure before I graph that my y values are repeating, which they are. So let's set up our graph. Now I've got to go negative 12 in the y, so let's make this a little bit longer. And everywhere else I'm going to go 5 units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, so I've got 1 negative, actually let's go negative 3, negative 12. I've got negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 0, negative 6, and I've got 1, negative 12. Now I'm missing a point here, which is my vertex, which is negative 1, 1, 2, 3, negative 4. Now, the graph is opening downward. I knew that by looking at my A. This is the number, or the number that's in front of the parentheses, whatever that sign is. Since it's a negative, that told me my graphs would be opening downward, not up. So when this number is a negative, it's going to be opening down. Okay, let's do another one. Number 3. I've got f of x is equal to negative, and then the quantity x plus 2 squared plus 1. All right, let's start. Remember, f of x is the same thing as y. It doesn't matter. Let's take a look at this vertex. I'm taking the opposite of what's here. That's a positive 2, so I'm putting a negative 2. And then this value is whatever it is. This says plus 1, so it's 1. The axis of symmetry is the x part of the vertex, which is a negative 2. Now, before I graph it, I see that this is a negative. That's telling me my graph's going to be opening downward. We'll keep that in mind. Let's set up our table. I've got negative and then x plus 2 squared plus 1. Now I'm going to do 2 numbers that come before negative 2, which is negative 4, negative 3, and then 2 numbers after, which is negative 1, 0. So negative 4, negative 3, negative 1, 0. So negative 4 plus 2 is a negative 2. Negative 2 squared is a positive 4. And then this is really a 1 here. It's really a negative 1. So negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Plus 1 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus 2 is a negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. 1 times negative 1 is 1. Plus 1, that's giving us 0. Negative 1 plus 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. 1 times negative 1. We've got a bunch of 1's going on here. Negative 1 plus 1 is 0. And then 0 plus 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. Plus 1, that gives us negative 3. So let's go through and graph this. Let's do negative 4, negative 3. I've got negative 3, 0, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 3, and then I've got my vertex, which is negative 2, positive 1. Make that as curvy as we can. It's not that great. And again, because this is a negative, I knew my graph was going to be opening downward. So I've got my graph, I've got my vertex, and I've got my axis of symmetry. We're going to do one more. Let's take a look at number 4. I've got 2 times, let's do y equals 2 times x minus 2, and then squared. 2 times x minus 2 squared. So let's, first of all, I'm looking at this is a positive, so I know my graph's going to be opening upward. My vertex, I'm going to take the opposite of what's here, so it's a positive 2. And then I don't have any plus or minus anything over here. That means the y part of the vertex is 0. My axis of symmetry is the x part of the vertex, which is 2. So let's set up our table. I'm going to go 2 numbers before 2, which are 0 and 1, 2 numbers after, which is 0 and 4. But let's finish writing this down. So I've got 0, 1, 3, and 4. Let's do the work. 0 minus 2 is -2. -2 squared is 4. I really don't even need to do any work here. I can do this all at once. 0 minus 2 is -2. -2 squared is 4. 4 times 2, that's giving us 8. 1 minus 2 is -1. -1 squared is 1. 1 times 2 is 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. Times 2 is 2. 4 minus 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. 4 times 2, 8. So I left this, I didn't really need this piece, but that's okay. Let's graph it. We're going to need 8 in the positive. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we'll go 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I've got 0, 8. I've got 1, 2. I've got 3, 2. And I've got 4, 8. And then I've got 2, 0. And I probably should have said this earlier, but the larger this number gets, that A, the more narrow that graph gets. So if you can tell, this V is a little bit closer together. And that's because the larger this number gets, the more narrow it gets. So we've got the graph, we've got the vertex, we've got the axis of symmetry. The axis of symmetry is really when I draw a vertical line, it makes the graph symmetric, like a mirror image, and that's at 2. That's why it's always the x part of the vertex, because that vertex is really the center of our graph. And that is the last unit, Unit 5, Lesson 5. And before we sign off here, on behalf of myself, Mr. Preet, I'd like to thank Mrs. Janton, Mr. Pereira, Ms. Belanger for, we worked as a team to get these study guides together for you, and hopefully they'll do its job. Thank you.